Jim Birkeland is a geologist and 50-year fellow with the Geological Society of America. He's the guy I saw yesterday who scared the wits out of me yesterday. How you doing, Jim?
I'm doing just great, and the last thing I want to do is scare people, but I sure want to inform them.
Well, if there's any validity to your beliefs at all, there's no harm in being prepared. That's for sure.
Oh, so, yeah, don't be scared, be prepared. That's a good watchword.
Did we just make that up together now? Should we patent that or something?
Well, I was the co-author.
Oh, okay. I can't take credit for it. So, Jim, let's just explain that kind of the bigger picture theory about, because you're not the only one who's talking about the fact that we've had earthquakes in Chile, we've had them in New Zealand, we've had them in Japan, and, this is all part of one big plate that's moving, but it's stuck in California. Can you just go over the basics of that?
Well, let me just give it almost exact parallel to what we're facing right there. Here, this was Friday afternoon, October 13th, 1989, and the headline is High Tides to Mean Little Trouble in Bay Area. The highest tides in several years will occur. Well, I'd known that in December of 1986, 3 years before the World Series quake, we were going to have extremely high tides, and I went to the meeting of the Peninsula Geological Society and said I expected a quake of 3.5 to 5.5 magnitude to hit the Bay Area at the time of these extreme tides. And there was a little shock in the audience, but my former colleague at the USGS was the president of the club, and he's the one that allowed me to make this mention. And sure enough, 2 weeks later, we had the highest tides of the year in several years. And that morning on the way to work, just before I left for work, a 4.6 quake hit about 5 miles from my house. And it was felt all up and down, Santa Rosa and Monterey. And so it was a fairly impressive little jolt, and but no damage I know about. But I got high praise from the president of the Peninsula Geological Society, and I was a little concerned because he sent me a little card to congratulations, said, "I'll never doubt you again, Jim." And I thought, my gosh, he's a 35-year geologist with the organization. He's risking his career by agreeing with me. Well, it turned out he had just retired at the end of the year, so he could say what he wanted. Well, that same day, there was an article in the Gilroy Dispatch on Friday the 13th of October, and you'll see a little item, is World Series quake coming? Yeah, while the area is rumbling with about the first ever Bay Bridge World Series, the Earth may be putting on its own show. And so I was predicting to the reporter, I said it's 6.5 to 7, which I'd told my colleagues because of the extreme tides, and there had been kind of a delay since the last strong quake in the Bay Area. But not only did we have these extreme tides, we had extreme numbers of missing pets. And thanks to a Argentinian physicist, he had alerted me in 1979 that he could predict local quakes based upon the numbers of missing cats in the local paper.
Hey, Jim, I'm going to stop you there because we kind of moved off. You skipped past plate theory and moved on to something else. And you'd have established, I guess, some credibility in people's minds when you say, you predicted a couple of these earthquakes ahead of time. But when you bring in animals and stuff, you may lose a lot of people. So let's take a break and come back and discuss that more and why you think that's relevant.
Half the story.
All right. Jim Birkeland, the geologist, 50-year fellow with the Geological Society of America, predicting an earthquake in California imminently, almost. I mean, we're with it by the time the month is over. Jim Birkeland is a geologist, 50-year fellow with the Geological Society of America, but he's also on this issue kind of a rebel.
Oh, yes, a maverick. That's what the book is about. The man who predicts earthquakes, Jim Birkeland, the maverick geologist. And I'm proud of it.
Anyway. Hold on, Jim. Just back it up a little bit. It's easy to find, and I've searched, it's easy to find people in your field who will agree that an earthquake in one area can trigger earthquakes nearby.
That's a recent development in the field of geology.
You're right. And 10 years ago, you couldn't find that. You're right. 10 years ago, you couldn't find that.
Right.
So now there are others, and I want to know if you're one of them, who believe that an earthquake far away, like in Japan, like the one in Chile and New Zealand, can have an impact to put extra stress on something like the San Andreas Fault or on the nearby fault lines here. Do you believe that?
Yes.
Okay, so that is 50% of your worry right now for California?
Well, I have a number of worries. The fish that died at Redondo Beach, and the earthquake fish, the oarfish that washed up at Malibu last December. That's an earthquake fish that the Japanese are frightened about. But let's just deal with animals, or let me just deal with tides.
Well, I want to deal with fish. What does the fish have to do with earthquakes?
Well, the orientation of whales and sharks and salmon and dolphins and birds, they are able to navigate by means of a magnetic field, and they have magnetite in their bodies. And this has only been known for about the last 30 years. And we know that the magnetic field of the Earth is affected by solar storms, and also affected by local tectonic forces as earthquakes are about to develop. And so you can pick up areas that where animals are running away from home, or deep sea fish coming into shallow water. And although the fish killer at Redondo Beach was 1 million fish came into shallow water and died because there wasn't enough oxygen, and they were supposedly chased in by predator fish, which is baloney. Then you had lots of the whales that just were off.
Okay, so what's throwing them off, and how does that affect the Earth's crust?
The way they navigate is by means of the magnetic field, and when the magnetic field gets distorted by changes in the Earth's magnetic, the magnetic grains, the magnetite, and you can reproduce this in the laboratory. It makes them very unsettled. And so wild animals will come into town, and your pets will run away in many cases. And deep sea fish come to shallow water. And
so what's happening to change the magnetic field in this area?
That's what I'm looking for right now. One thing it's building up is the highest tidal force that we will see till the year 2016. And I'm concerned about this upcoming period, which I call a seismic window, between the 19th and the 26th. It's almost identical to what happened in October 14 to 21 of 1989 when I predicted a World Series earthquake in the newspaper. So right now, if you go to a tide calendar, and I'm loaded with them every year, you will see on the 19th we have the full moon called the worm moon. It was only less than an hour away from the closest approach to the moon in several years. Certainly the closest approach of the month, and that's called perigee. And then the next day
that's the two things happening at once: a full moon and the moon closer to Earth.
Right, and that's every 27.5 days for the perigee, and every.
All right, now hold on. Before you just dismiss that as quackery,
because of spring, the opening day of spring with the equinoctial tides. So three things happening within 24 hours.
Okay, and we do accept that the moon impacts on the oceans and lakes and seas.
Yes.